This is the Melbourne Press Club's Lifetime Achievement Award. To announce the winner of this year's award, please welcome to the stage a very well-known man in Victorian media, the long-time Director of News for 7 Melbourne, Mr. Stephen Carey.
Okay. It gives me absolutely enormous pleasure to announce the winner of the Lifetime Achievement Award is a very close and good friend of mine, Jennifer Kite.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of 10 News First live from Flemington.
Her values that I adore: honesty, trust, friendship, generosity, and of course, that wicked laugh.
Move your legs.
I'm not real!
Good evening. Also tonight, a mass escape plan uncovered in Sydney's Long Bay Jail. The 9 tiny ships completed their epic voyage.
80% of rivers in Gippsland are still at major flood levels.
The fact that she's got news gathering in her blood, and she is such a great presenter anyway. She's got that warmth and sincerity that you need, and you know, she's one of the best in the business.
Lately, I've been moving close to the edge, still be looking my best.
Now this will come as a bit of a shock, but I can finally reveal that Jennifer Kite has been stalking me. She followed me first to Channel 9, then Channel 7, then Channel 10. Now it has to stop, because where I'm going next, she won't want to follow.
Watch me.
And we'll have Boy George here to talk with you live later in the bulletin.
Got the solo job at 7 as a female presenter in the early days, and that wouldn't have been easy, up against all the testosterone that was floating around in the industry in the 80s.
Good evening. The Commonwealth Games have developed into a 2-horse race between Australia and
I
England.
remember being asked last century, when will we see a woman over 30 on our television screens? Well, you legion of doubters, Jen's proved you wrong. She's nearly 40. What a credible, trustworthy, decent young woman she is.
Victoria's worst fears have been realised today, with wild winds whipping up dozens of fires around the state.
I'm here tonight because of the terrifying and tragic story that has gripped Melbourne for the past week. The shocking death of Jill Meagher.
The heartbreaking journey home for the King of Spin. To the Fast and Furious F1.
Good evening from London, and 2 days out from the Queen's funeral.
Welcome to this special edition of 10 News First live from the deck of HMAS Sydney.
I congratulate you. I send you my love and wish you all the very, very best.
We're very lucky at 10 to have her, and that her career is still going from strength to strength. I hold her in the highest regards. She's professional, she's a dream to work with, and she's accomplished so much. So Jen, this is a richly deserved reward. So have a great night, congratulations and thanks.
Jen, congratulations on this fantastic honour. I've worked with you on and off since 1984, can you believe it? And longevity is something very special in this business. If only viewers knew what happens on set in between stories. I promise I'll do my best to keep you laughing. Cheers, Quarters.
For now, good night.
deserved. Very, very well deserved. So many memories, so many hairstyles, Katie, but well done. When organisers asked me to make this speech, I promised I wouldn't do a Barnaby, so apologies tonight, no prescription drugs mixed with alcohol for me. But I did hesitate to provide the introduction for our Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, not because I didn't want to pay tribute to and honour one of the most professional and incredible people I know, but more how do you condense such a vast body of work into a couple of minutes? Anyway, I'm not going to try, because to just about everyone in this room and to hundreds of thousands more of Australians across the country, she's already well known. Jennifer Kite, journalist, TV news presenter, talented interviewer, writer, broadcaster, loving mum, wonderful colleague and loyal friend. I've had the pleasure of working with Jen in a variety of roles, on the road as a fellow journalist, as her chief of staff, producer, and as one of her many news directors. I've watched her report from bushfire and flood zones to crime scenes, cover local, state and federal elections, anchor historic royal events, most recently the passing of the Queen. She's hosted major sporting celebrations like the Grand Prix, Melbourne Cup, Australian Open and AFL finals, and she's detailed every other facet of human life. She is the consummate storyteller. If you want the definition of versatility, Jen is it. Apart from delivering the news, there are few who could hold the stage with Steve Vizard, roll with hours of live audience presenting during numerous Royal Children's Hospital appeals, or provide ongoing coverage during major crises. I was there to see her work on the Black Saturday Bushfire Bulletin. It was extraordinary. And at a time of crisis and incredible emotion, Jen brought to that bulletin those rarest of commodities, trust and reassurance. You may have guessed I'm a fan, but that's based on decades of witnessing her work ethic and something else which is rare. She's absolutely committed to her craft, honed over decades in an industry which, let's be honest, has not always provided the easiest pathway for women. There's a reality TV program called Survivor. I can tell you that show is child's play compared to the power plays within a commercial TV newsroom. And Jen is rare in that world. I never heard her say a bad word about anyone, and believe me, she could have. So it is my great pleasure to give you the person I know and love as Mighty Kitey, Jennifer Kite.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Scary. We have been friends. We've been together a long time. And you're right about those haircuts. I can't believe they allowed me to go on air looking like that. But here we are. It's an honour to receive this award tonight, so thank you to the Melbourne Press Club. I'm truly humbled to be acknowledged for working in an industry that I love and have loved for over 40 years. It's been an absolute joy. What I love about it the most is teamwork. And I learned that early on, from day one. You're only as good as your team. You rely on your team to get the facts right, to get the story done, to get it edited, to get it to air. And it's a daily grind, and it's always been a thrill. But the teams I've worked with have been really extraordinary. When I think back to Channel 10 in the 80s, I started when Jana Wendt was reading with David Johnston, and they were incredible mentors. I was also doing work for Good Morning Australia with Kerry Ann Kennelly and Gordon Elliott. They were phenomenal operators in live television. Channel 10 in those days was called the nursery because it nurtured so much young talent. Out at Nunawading, I started in the newsroom with a group of young reporters, a young guy from Adelaide called Bruce McAvaney, a very hungry guy from Broadmeadows called Eddie Maguire, Stephen Quartermain, Bridget Duclos, Jennifer Hansen. It was such a great team in the early 80s. Actually, I think we all went to Eddie's 21st. They were fun days. They were really, really great times. There were no mobile phones. We worked hard, we played hard, And on a quiet news day, we'd even take the chopper to lunch. They were the 80s. There was lots of money. The news was so powerful. We were bookended, Channel 10 News, Eyewitness News, by Perfect Match and Neighbours in their heyday. The ratings were phenomenal. They were huge, and so were the stories. When I started, I think the biggest story was Azaria Chamberlain. And then as a young reporter, I was out covering the Pope in Melbourne, Prince Charles and Diana in Melbourne. Then I was in London when Diana died in '97, and I was with the Nine Network, and I actually got to work on her funeral with an amazing team. And I got to look inside the Nine machine and understand how phenomenal that was, and to work with Ray Martin in a live situation. There was the Russell Street bombing, the Underbelly days, Hoddle Street, Jill Maher, Black Saturday, as Scary said, and I think that'll always sit in my mind as the hardest, biggest story I've ever been part of. I can remember that day, as many of you in this room will. That day in Melbourne, I was heading into work and I stepped outside and the air was so hot, just breathing. You could feel the intensity of the heat, and then the wind kicked up. And as I headed into work, I knew it was a day of hell, but I had no concept of just how bad it was going to be. When we went to air that night, I think we had a couple of houses lost. And then at 9 o'clock that night, we were still on air, and the police called a press conference, and we had no crews available, no journalists. We said, we can't come to you, we can't come to a press conference at 9 p.m, so much is going on, it's Armageddon. And so the Chief Commissioner said, Jen, if you're on air, I'll come to you. I knew it was bad. He came to us, we went to air, and just before we went to air, he said, Jen, it's really bad. And I said, how bad? He said, bodies everywhere. And I thought, imagine the crews out there now, still working, the reporters out there, the people who've been affected. And I knew this was going to be a story none of us would ever forget. Then we had the Burke Street rampage, the death of the Queen, and of course we've all lived through it, COVID, one of the biggest stories we've all been a part of. A lot of people ask me if the great series on the ABC, The Newsreader, is accurate. And I say, yes, it is, most of it. It could have been shot at Dorcas Street, South Melbourne at Channel 7. That the only thing missing is the ashtray and the cigarette smoke. In the 80s, every reporter had a typewriter and an ashtray, and yes, the cup of coffee. But they were such fun shows. I also did a show called Tonight Live with Steve Vizard. People thought we were mad, putting your news anchor onto a Tonight show. But somehow we made it work, and Steve was great fun. He only came close once to crossing the line, and that was when he introduced a segment called Nudie Hobbies. So he decided, let's get a group of nudists in, and they can do their hobbies on the show. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting as long as it's not near the news. So they came in and they were doing arts and crafts, and then one night they were doing ballroom dancing right before my news. So eventually I had to say to him, Steve, it's the nudies or me. It's also been a great privilege during my career to be associated with the Royal Children's Hospital. I was a patron of the Good Friday Appeal for over 20 years, and I really treasured that job, and I loved so many of the people I met. I also did a show for the Nine Network called Good Medicine, and worked with the wonderful Dan Meenan and Simon Reeve. A few thank yous before I finish. My first news director in radio was Rob Grant. He opened the door for me. Dennis O'Kane was an early radio mentor. John O'Lone, my first TV news director. David Broadbent, who was my news director and had the courage to put me on the desk solo. I'll always remember that day. I was in the newsroom, I was co-anchoring with Glenn Taylor, and I got a call to say, the bosses want to see you upstairs. So I went upstairs, and all the bosses were there. They were cement-coloured, ashen faces, and I knew it couldn't be good. And they said, Jen, we've decided to go with one newsreader. And I said, there it is. I'm the co-anchor. I know how this works. This is late 80s. I'm the woman. What's going to happen? And then they said, no, we're going with you. And I laughed. I couldn't stop laughing. I was incredulous. I said, are you serious? A commercial network is going Monday to Friday solo with me. And they said, yes, the research shows that you work. And I said, well, if you're offering, I'll take it. All the interviews I did after that for a long time, the journalists would always say, so Jen, what's your use-by date? You know, you're a young woman, you've been a co-anchor, they're putting you in the big chair. How do you think you'll go? How long can you last? And I'm happy to say I haven't been asked that question in 20 years. I'd also like to thank my mentor, Peter Meakin, Steve Vizard, to my boys, James and Alexander. I've missed so many school events and parties, but we've had fun. To my family for all your support and wisdom over the years, but most of all, your humour. It keeps us grounded. To my managers, Kim and Isaac, 30 years of guidance and friendship. Thank you for everything. Nat Vincentich, a beautiful artist and friend. We've shared so much. Also, a very brief thank you to Bob Kersley, Neil Miller, Steve Carey, Simon Pristol, Mark Gillies, and to my current news director, Nicole Strawn. Nick, you lead an amazing team at 10 News First. You inspire the next wave of talent with intelligence, warmth, and class. So thank you. It's a joy working with you. And he said not to mention his name, but James Bird, thanks for all the laughter. Thank you very much.